Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Databank. This is your host, Bobby Lamarco, the Fantasy Football X Factor. Just to let you know, I'm going to be going quick this week. It's Halloween, got places to go, but I wanted to get this databank out there, so let's get started. I will be using my spreadsheets for all these articles, so if you're interested in these spreadsheets, like I said, hit me up on YouTube or Instagram, slot versus wide, fantasy football analysis, so you can understand where the points are coming from wide receivers, in tight versus slot for tight ends, yada yada, success rate modeling, got it all. So let me know. Patriots versus Bills. Just remember, I have recorded all the 1 p.m. games on the other podcast that went out earlier this week, the early season, early games preview with the TCK pod, the Candlestick Kid. So if you want to go check out the full detailed analysis for these games, go check out that video. Now, for this, I'm going to just update. Julian Edelman is out. Now, the Bills are getting back Levi Wallace, which means that they're going to have their 2 starting outside cornerbacks for this game. I do believe there is some value for the Patriots offense, though. I think Damian Harris could be a solid play as a flex on the ground game. It's the only way they're going to stay in this matchup is if they can run the football against Buffalo. And then I also think James White is on the PPR and half-point PPR running back RB2. We've seen in the past when Edelman is out, the 4 games he was out. If you see my opportunities analysis, I talk about this. I think James White is going to get a lot of looks in the pass game. I do believe that he's going to be a solid RB2/flex in any PPR format in this week because of no Edelman. And then Gunnar Olszewski, I don't even know how to say his name. The Bills get beat in the slot. That's where you beat them. And Gunnar's going to probably take over for Edelman in the slot. If you're desperate, if you're looking for just someone that can get you maybe double digits in PPR, I think Gunnar is someone that I'm looking at as a dart throw DFS in DK, not FanDuel. And I'll explain in another video why that is. For the Bills side, listen, I think the news of Stephon Gilmore being out is great for Stephon Diggs, but if we know anything about Bill Belichick, he's not going to let Stephon Diggs beat him. So I'm still kind of viewing Stephon Diggs as just a flex. John Brown last year did have 1 big catch versus the Patriots and scored a touchdown last year, but overall, I think the guy you really want in the passing game is going to be Cole Beasley. He had 7 receptions in both games last year. I think that's where you beat the Patriots, so I think I'm rolling with Cole Beasley. And that's pretty much it, even with the Stephon Gilmore injury, outside of just Josh Allen. Next game, Titans and Bengals. Not a lot to report here in the sense of, new injuries, so go check out the podcast. The one thing I will say is the Bengals are going to be down 3 starting offensive linemen. That is alarming. I think Gio is going to be a tough to start. As an RB2, he's going to have to get it done in the passing game, which he can, which is fine. I think Joe Burrow is going to be under duress so with Clowney and the Titans defensive line all day, especially with this many injuries up front. That does worry me a little bit about the pass catchers, but this should be a good pass volume game. Joe Burrow has shown that he can get the football out of his hands quick, so I think that's going to help guys like A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, and I think Gio is going to see a couple receptions, but I think the ground game is going to be useless against the Titans because of all this updates. The Raiders and the Browns, not a lot to report from an injury front. Austin Hooper has been ruled out. Harrison Bryant is on the tight end 1, low-end tight end 1 radar. He did run more routes than Njoku. The Raiders have been beatable against tight ends. So Gronk and Kelsey both had very productive days. So I do believe that Harrison Bryant, if you're in a pinch for a tight end, he could be a low-end tight end 1. If you want to hear all my other starts, you go check out the podcast from earlier in the week. Colts, Lions. Colts, the offensive center Ryan Kelly is out or looking to be questionable at least. And that's a slight downgrade for everybody, but I think Jonathan Taylor is still rolling with him. And then Detroit just acquired Everson Griffin. So that's interesting. Detroit's run defense should improve with Everson Griffin, but that's something maybe more down the line. Michael Pittman's coming back and Mo Alley Cox. Now keep in mind, T.Y. Hilton has not looked the same this year, and they're hurting for playmakers. So Michael Pittman might be someone worth picking up, stashing on your bench to see how he looks, because Marcus Johnson last week had a very good game for Philip Rivers against Cincinnati 2 weeks ago. So maybe Michael Pittman can now take over with T.Y. Hilton not looking the same. Maybe Pittman becomes the better player, and then Mo Alley Cox just clouds things for Trey Burton. I'm fading Burton this week if you have him as your starting tight end 1. I would look elsewhere. I just don't think Burton's going to give you enough volume this week because he's going to be sharing the work. Plus, the Colts are in a low pass volume projection game. Let's see. Steelers and the Ravens. The biggest updates, Mark Ingram is out, so that's good news for J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Very tough matchup. Not a good matchup at all for them. I'm not really feeling either of them. I think the only two guys I want is Lamar Jackson and Marquise Hollywood Brown. Mark Andrews, of course, is a must start, but this is a very tough matchup for him. Outside of that, there is no other new injuries that really need to report, so you can check out the podcast for that. Vikings, Packers. I think it's just a weather thing. I think you got to look at the weather tomorrow. I send out little notes in the morning to check out the weather forecast. 25-mile-an-hour winds. I think that means to me is that this is going to be a much lower scoring game than it was in week one. There's a lot of volume. The one thing that is notable, Kevin King is hurt. So Kevin King is going to would have been the guy to cover Justin Jefferson because Jair Alexander is going to be on Adam Thielen. I think that does improve Justin Jefferson's matchup. So I think Thielen and Jefferson are on the starting radar. Irv Smith as well. I think Irv Smith could be a solid short check down guy for him, and I think he can get you 50 yards receiving in this game, especially with the Packers expected to score in this one. Of course, the Packers' big news, Aaron Jones is out, so Jamal Williams are going to keep rolling with him. I think this is a fantastic, especially if it's very windy. They're going to expect to lean on the ground game a little bit more, which is good news for him. The Vikings are also down Mike Hughes, but they're getting Dantzler back. They also traded one of their defensive tackles, so it's interesting what the Vikings are doing. Very good football team, but the record isn't showing it. I think you're just rolling with Devontae Adams, really, from the Packers side. Tanyan and MVS with the wind. I just don't think there's going to be enough volume in this game to support all these pass catchers. So maybe I'm favoring the running backs, Aaron Rodgers, and then everyone else is going to kind of split the rest. So I think I'm just leading Devontae Adams, fading Robert Tanyan and MVS in this game. Jets and the Chiefs. Now, this game, very simple. There's a lot of injuries for the Jets. Bashard Perriman, Jamison Crowder. I wrote in my opportunities analysis that I do like Denzel Mims. And Mims, I think he plays the Z receiver, so he does kick inside about 25 to 30%, which means that he does get away from press coverage on the outside. And I do think that's notable because we have seen guys like Stephon Diggs play very well, Henry Ruggs, and also Tyreek Hill, for example. Not Tyreek Hill, but Stephon Diggs and Ruggs all perform pretty well. But go check out my article on the opportunities analysis. I do like Mims. I think Mims is a wide receiver 3 this week because of the volume, because of the targets, and we have seen other guys succeed. Even Damari Bird, for example, had 80 yards against the Chiefs, playing a little catch-up. On the Chiefs side, I think really there is no notable updates. The Jets are going to miss their safety, Brady McDougal. So that's good news for, I think, Travis Kelce. I think there is some worry this game could get out of hand early, which means that these guys aren't going to have a lot of volume. But we saw last week, Tyreek Hill got his. I think Kelce's always going to be a start. You're not going to sit him, but I'm not going to start anybody outside of maybe Le'Veon Bell, the revenge game factor. I think that's true. I think Le'Veon Bell's good. I think he's going to be very good for this team. When I look at the adjusted line yards, I talked about this in my podcast, so don't need to go into it much further. But I think Lev Bell's a start for me, along with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because they're going to dominate this game on the ground. Rams, Dolphins, and no new updates for this game, so you guys can just check out the podcast from earlier in the week. Chargers, Broncos. I think this starts the 4 p.m. games, but I'm just gonna dive into it. So this is a good pass volume game based on how many dropbacks these teams have seen this season. So when you're looking at it, though, the Broncos are getting healthy. They got back A.J. Boye, which is great news for their secondary because they have been getting beat on the outside. And that is notable because now they have A.J. Boye back. That's going to basically kind of shore up their weakness on the outside corner. And I think that's notable for Justin Herbert this week. I think Keenan Allen's the only guy I'm really interested in starting. But outside of that, 9 other players got a target last week. They spread the wealth. I am fading Hunter Henry. Jalen Guyton is actually outperforming Mike Williams, which is very odd. It seems very streaky which one of those guys is going to be good each week. So I think outside of Keenan Allen, I think he's the only guy I'm really interested in playing in this matchup. The running backs are, they're going to have a tough time against the Denver Broncos run defense. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game. So I'm kind of fading everybody outside of the studs. I'm not even too high on Justin Herbert necessarily. I think the Broncos defense is turning a corner a little bit. I think that could be notable for this game. Also, the thing that's important to note, too, is Brian Bulaga might be back, the left tackle, which is good, but they're going to lose their other guard. So I think it's kind of a washout. On the other side, Graham Glasgow is out. One of their offseason acquisition at guard. That's bad news for Phillip Lindsay's back. Melvin Gordon and them are going to be splitting. I'm not too high on any of the Broncos either, but the two guys I do want to talk about are Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy. Noah Fant did get outproduced by the rookie last week at the tight end position, but Noah Fant's running a lot of routes. He doesn't look 100% yet, but I think he got a couple full practices in this week. You're going to see him more healthy, and the Broncos with Pat Shurmur utilize the tight end a bunch. So I think Noah Fant is a good start this week. Also, Jerry Jeudy. So Jeudy plays about 50% of his snaps in the slot. Since the Chargers have lost Chris Harris, been very vulnerable to slot receivers. So I think you could play Jerry Jeudy in this one. I think he's been pacing the team in routes. So I think it's time for him to finally step up. So I think I'm really interested in starting Keenan Allen, Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy in this game. That's it. Saints-Bears, this is in Chicago. This is tough because both teams are going to have lower pass volume projections. There's no Michael Thomas, no Callaway, no Sanders for the injuries to the Saints. But I do believe that does open up some opportunities. Last week I said fade Traquan Smith. I think this week Traquan Smith is actually in play as a wide receiver 3, especially he's like the last man in town. But I also do believe because of the matchup with Chicago, who's actually a little more susceptible to outside wide receivers than slot. So I think Traquan Smith could be a wide receiver 3 this week out of necessity. And also Jared Cook. I mean, Chicago has allowed production to tight end. So I think Jared Cook, once again, always a threat for a touchdown, is in play for the Saints. And, of course, you're not sitting Alvin Kamara. I'm not getting cute with Latavius Murray, and I am not playing Drew Brees. So I think it's going to be Alvin Kamara, Jared Cook, and Traquan Smith, and that's it. On the Bears side, it's just Allen Robinson and Jimmy Graham. So, it's a tough game. The Saints finally got back their corners, Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins. Allen Robinson typically would get shadowed, but Allen Robinson plays a lot in the slot, and I think he's going to get away enough from Marshawn Lattimore to be useful for fantasy, so I'm playing Allen Robinson. And Jimmy Graham, the Saints have been terrible at covering tight ends. And I think Jimmy Graham, because of the game flow and what the direction is going to be, I think Jimmy Graham is a solid tight end 1 this week. If you can get him, pick him up, play him. I think he'll be a decent play in this matchup. But I'm sitting David Montgomery. I am not interested. Cody Whitehair, their center, is now out too, and I just think that's just a disaster for them. They're not going to be able to run the football against the Saints. One of the more exciting games of the week, the 49ers versus the Seahawks. Now, of course, for the 49ers, no Raheem Mostert, no Jeff Wilson, no Deebo Samuel. On the Seahawks defensive side, no Shaquille Griffin. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think everybody loves Brandon Ayuk this week, so it's not really a surprise that I'm talking about him. In the Seattle, most dropbacks in the NFL on defense, most points given up to wide receivers. It's Ayuk time. If Ayuk doesn't do it this week, then what are we doing in fantasy? So Ayuk's in your lineups. I also do believe that George Kittle is a must start. Now, the running back situation is very cloudy. Hasty seems like he's got this vibe going about him. He's the Kyle Shanahan undrafted free agent guy. But Tevin Coleman's back. He's back from IR, and he's the veteran. So you're going to see he's going to get the work. I do lean Tevin Coleman to Hasty. I just think Tevin Coleman, they talked about giving him a full workload on Thursday to see how he responds. He responded well. He's going to be in the game. I think Tevin Coleman is a start over Hasty in this matchup. I think Jimmy G, to me, could be a play. I think the Seattle Seahawks offense is playing so well that it forces everyone's offenses to play well. We saw it last week with Kyler Murray. He had a monster game. I think Jimmy G, especially because he's such a low-cost option on DFS, is a great DFS play this week. I think that he has enough weapons, even with Debo out, that he could perform in this matchup. On the injuries to the Seahawks side for offense, it's Chris Carson. Will he play? He's questionable. And then Carlos Hyde. I think you're starting – I think the San Francisco's defense is very good. But they have played a very interesting schedule. The struggling Patriots. They haven't played anybody that's like blowing you away when it comes to their offense. So, I think that you could start whoever the starting running back is going to be for the Seattle Seahawks. Last year, DK Metcalf had 2 good games versus this team. Tyler Lockett, you're not going to sit him after his monster performance. So I think you're kind of going chalk with the Seahawks. But I think the real question is it Homer or Dallas? Let's say Hyde is out. I'm leading Travis Homer. He's the passing down back. I don't expect Seattle with the injury to Mike Idiopati at their guard position. I don't expect them to run the football very well. even with DJ Dallas. So I think Travis Homer could be a nice little PPR asset. Plus, he was getting the work before Dallas anyway. So I think Travis Homer is the guy I want if Hyde and if Carson are ruled out, and I would play him as a flex option this week. Sunday night, Cowboys, Eagles, no Dalton. Listen, typically I would tell you Michael Gallup is a sleeper in this game. We know Darius Slay is going to be on Amari Cooper. I'm not playing Amari Cooper because of that. The only thing that could be the saving grace for the Cowboys is they're going to have negative game script. The line in this game is now in double digits. So I don't think Amari Cooper is no longer a must-sit player. He is now back in the wide receiver 3 map because there could be garbage time. This game could be bad. So I do believe that Amari Cooper is a wide receiver 3. And Michael Gallup is, to me, he got a 0-point performance. Typically, I would tell you that in a more competitive Dallas game versus the Philadelphia Eagles because of Darius Slay to start Michael Gallup, but I'm not going to. I think Amari Cooper is back on the wide receiver 3 map because of the negative game script. So I don't think he's a must-sit player anymore. And then Zeke, listen, you got to roll with him. I mean, he's owned Philadelphia in his career. Zach Martin is coming back, which is good news for the offensive line. You just hold your breath and hope for the best. It is what it is. Eagles DST should be definitely in play in this one. So those are the guys I'm starting on that side. On the Eagles side, no Miles Sanders. Alshon Jeffrey's out still. Jalen Reagor's coming back, which is interesting because the Dallas Cowboys outside corners are not good. So Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham are both kind of wide receiver 3s this week in this matchup versus a very bad Cowboys secondary, especially to outside wide receivers. And then Lane Johnson, the right tackle's back. So that's great news for Carson Wentz and the team as a whole. With Miles Sanders out, I think you're starting Boston Scott as a solid RB2. So for the Eagles, I really like Travis Fulgham, Boston Scott. Reagor is a sleeper wide receiver 3. And also, I think Carson Wentz, to me, they're not going to need to throw. I don't think this game is going to become a shootout. So I just think I'm a little worried about Carson Wentz from a season-long QB1. I think he's still borderline QB1 because the matchup is so good, but I just expect the Eagles to perform in this game. They might not need to throw as much as Carson Wentz has had to do in the past. Final game is Bucks versus the Giants, and I think when you evaluate this game, it could get out of hand early. It's one of the bigger spreads of the week. Buccaneers are big away favorites, which is always interesting. Tom Brady's rolling. The one thing I will tell you is Mike Evans will see James Bradbury. I'm fading Mike Evans. Go check out my article on our opportunities analysis, also the shadow coverage report. I talk about it in both of those. I'm fading Mike Evans, but I like everybody else for the most part. Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson's an interesting deep sleeper. Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette should get enough work in this game, and a Tom Brady's a start. Rob Gronkowski, to me, might be a sit because the Giants have actually been very good against tight ends this year. They haven't allowed a lot of production. So because the game is not going to need to be a shootout like it has been the last couple of weeks, I just don't think that it's going to be everybody gets points. I think it's going to be, Scotty Miller. My picks are Scotty Miller, Tom Brady, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, and maybe Tyler Johnson's a sleeper. I'm fading Mike Evans, and I'm fading Rob Gronkowski in this matchup. As for the Giants, there is no Devonta Freeman. That means Gallman should get most of the work. I'm just not interested in that run game at all. But where I am interested because of the game flow is Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard, because we have seen guys like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore put up points against this Buccaneers secondary because they're down big and they get to play prevent defense. So I'm okay with starting those guys. I know the matchup is tough, but the Giants are going to have to throw in this one, and I think Darius Slay and Sterling Shepard are talented enough to get some wide receiver garbage time production in this game. So that wraps up the opportunity. That wraps up the Databank for Week 8. Thanks, guys, for joining again. Please, if you're interested in getting these deep dive statistical stats for the slot versus wide, DM me on Instagram or here. I can get you guys that stuff. And it's always a pleasure, and enjoy your Halloween.